Welcome to this live session hosted by Fab, your insurance broker and moving to France expert. Fab is like your immigration GP. We're here to answer all your questions: visas, residency, healthcare, driving, taxes, properties, and much more. We navigate the complexities of France to help you embrace the French lifestyle you've always imagined. Although we are experts in the immigration industry and have been working in this space since 2015, none of what we say should be considered legal or financial advice. It is also worth noting that the immigration industry is an ever-evolving field, so things that are relevant today might be outdated or inaccurate when you actually move to France. Fab's main source of revenue is insurance through our brand, Fab French Insurance. Our main goal is to ultimately help you move to France, as we only sell insurance to clients applying for a visa, a residency permit, or those with a French address. During this session, you can ask any questions you want. However, we will not answer long questions to keep the pace fast. We also won't be able to address questions related to personal or very specific issues, but rest assured, we can get in touch after this session to either advise or refer you to one of our trusted partners. And now it's time to get this event started. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find our answers valuable. Our greatest reward would be to be a part of your journey to moving to France. And hopefully, it starts with this session today. We will pause briefly to allow all registrants to join. The session will begin shortly.
Hi everyone. Welcome to this evening session or this morning session, depending on where you're in the planet. On the planet. So today I have the privilege of having quite a full panel with me. I'll be joined by Eleonore from Lexidy, Catharine from Survive France, and Join from Trad24. And also we have dear Nani, a fellow US expat in the background, who will be here to answer your questions. Feel free to ask any of your questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom meeting. Thanks again for joining us, and I'll ask all the panelists if you can turn the cameras back on so that we can see you. Hi everyone. We'll try to keep this session in about an hour. Obviously, if you have quite a lot of questions, we also will share the question list with the panelists so that they can reach out after the event. We'll send you a follow-up email as well, just so that you can get in touch. We'll share the panelist contact details so you can reach out, and some of them offer opportunities for you to book appointments. So don't worry if we can't address your questions live. You'll be able to get in touch directly afterwards. So let's get this started. So for those who don't know me, I'm Fabien. Tonight I'm wearing the beret because that's my penalty for having the voice off and being typically French. I'm the founder and managing director of Fab French Insurance and Expat Services. We've been doing this for 10 years now. Well, the introduction video kind of sums it up. But most importantly, I'm joined by a panel of 4 experts, but 3 will be talking to you. Eleonore, ladies first. Can you speak about you and what Lexidy does?
Of course. So I'm Eleonore. I'm a French registered attorney, and I'm specialized in immigration and relocation to France, of course. And I wanted to mention that I work with Lexidy. We are a legal tech law firm specialized on focusing on relocation in different European countries.
Yeah, and we've been working with Eleonore for years now, and they've been amazing, and hopefully for years to come. Yeah. So, well, let's stick with the ladies. Catherine, what is it you do?
Hi, everybody. Well, I'm Catherine, and I've been in France for 20 years, over 20 years actually, and I'm now actually French. But as you can see from my nice pink cheeks, having been out in the wind, I'm still very, very British. I've got my British skin here. I started Survive France in 2009 as a spin off from my blog, which was also called Survive France, because back in the day, everybody had a blog. And because I realized from the comments there was a massive need for support for people, for information and support. And that's basically what Survive France does.
Yeah, and you forgot to mention that occasionally we have world domination lunches.
Oh, we do,
together.
we are into the idea of world domination. Yeah, yeah. I do actually have access to a beret, but I'm not wearing it currently. But so yeah.
Next time.
Next time, okay.
Okay.
I'll embrace my inner French woman.
The
with a
audience is
beret.
here to, yeah, the audience is here. You're all witness. Huh? And so, well, last but not least, obviously, John. John, what is it you do?
Merci, Fabien. John, I'm from Minnesota, but I might have lost my accent since I've been in France for more than 20 years as well. And I help people like you with certified sworn translations. As you know, when you're coming to France, you have to get a lot of legal documents assembled, and then they need to get into French. And so we try and do that as quickly and as painlessly and as inexpensively as possible for you.
That's a sentence I love. As simply as Frenchly possible, basically. Good. Okay, so I'll start asking some questions that we often get or we got before this session. So back to you, Eleonore. Well, the title of this session is business visa, but I mean technically it doesn't exist because it's kind of a shell where we put different types because there are different types of visas. So actually, what different types of business visas are out there?
Yes, well, I imagine that when we speak about business visa, we are not really speaking about all the employee visa category. That is a huge category that is not the one we are mentioning today, but we are more speaking about people that have their own company or work as freelancers, for instance. And regarding this category, I'm trying to simplify as much as possible, but let's say that we have two different possibilities. Either we have the normal entrepreneur, what actually it's called profession libérale visa, but I find this name very confusing, so I always call it like the normal entrepreneur visa or the talent one. The talent one is, if I can say, a premium visa because it allows you to stay in France for up to 4 years, to bring your family with you, etc., etc. So the main difference between the two is the investment. If you apply for the talent one, you need to invest at least 30,000 euros in your project in France. And yeah, this is the main difference, apart from the fact that I mentioned that the duration, the family visa are different if you apply for the talent one. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically, in France, whatever you want to move to France to register a business, open up a business, or be like self-employed, it's all going to be some sort of a business visa, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. It allows you to be working in France, to register yourself as a freelancer or set up a company or the branch of your company. And you're allowed to work from France, to invoice from France, to have French clients and work as as an entrepreneur in France. Mm-hmm.
And well, actually, so because it's a question like there is I think a misconception. What's the main difference between so that some business visa, let's say the profession libérale visa, or a non-working visa? Like you've said it, but like the main difference is that you can't work in France with a non-working.
Yes, exactly. I imagine that you're speaking about the famous visitor visa, which is a bit different. It's also a 1-year visa that is renewable. but the visitor visa does not allow the holder to work in France. When you go to the consulate, they make you sign a paper saying that you are not going to be working in France. So as long as you do not have links with the French labor law market, you don't have a French company, you don't have a French contract, you don't have French registered entity or French clients or this kind of things, it's allowed to be working 100% remotely from France under the visitor visa. But yeah, you cannot have a proper company. So if your project is to be working as a freelancer in the country, or to conduct business in France, since that's the subject tonight, I would recommend one of the entrepreneur visa.
Yeah, and I think, well, I'm a bit cheeky because yeah, I've asked this so that it's clear for the audience that it's different. Like if you'd be working as a self-employed, a consultant, or you need to see yourself again as a business, you need to be registered, then you'll need to have some sort of a business visa. Otherwise, you won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
But also, we had this conversation right before we got this event started. What if someone actually moved with a non-working visa, so the visitor visa, but now wants to start a business? So like, well, we've got a
Yes.
question of someone who wants to set up a restaurant because they've been around for a few months. Is it
Yeah,
possible?
yeah. So what I always say to my clients is that you're not stuck with one visa or another. A lot of things can happen during life, and we have this flexibility of being able to change your visa type or change your residency permit type. So very often it happens that, for instance, a very basic example, someone arrives in France with a long stay visitor visa, then they want to do some Airbnb or open a gîte and do it like a little bit more intensively, and they need to register themselves. And this is perfectly feasible. We can always change from the visitor to the entrepreneur, from the entrepreneur to the family, to a family visa or an employee visa. So you're not stuck with one visa or another. It's always possible to change. And it's interesting because sometimes you don't know how life will be in France. You don't know what your project will be. So it gives you a little bit of time and flexibility to enter the country, see a little bit how things goes, and then apply for the entrepreneur residency permit directly.
Okay. So that's doable. That's good to know. Well, obviously, if you know in advance, you should apply for the write-up or visas right away. But France is not jail. You're in France, so you can change your plans and change your mind. That's good. Um, yeah, the main difference, I suppose, with business types of visa is that instead of, it's the joke I like to make. Well, it's not a joke, but like kind of a sign, like for every successful visa, like it needs to meet three main pillars: proof of income, proof of address, proof of medical coverage. So I suppose for the business visa, the proof of income is a bit more, I wouldn't say flexible, but like it's not just about bank statement. Like you have to provide a business plan. And do you have like, I'd say insiders tips about what the consulate does or how they evaluate a business plan or even like how to write a business plan, what makes a business plan sexy or appealing from the consulate's perspective?
It's a good question because each business plan is unique because it depends of your activity or of your project. So there is not really a template, but we have some guidelines because not templates because we don't. Every project is very different and we cannot have the same conditions and same requisite for any type of activity. We have many, many different profiles. Any type of work can be done by an entrepreneur. So we have a variety of different business plans. But there are some things that are important to outline when you prepare it. For instance, explaining what kind of clients you will have, what kind of activity you will conduct in France, how much you think you will invoice for the first year, for the second year, for the third year, where you're going to be located. Are your clients going to be physically coming to your office or your shop, or are you going to be working remotely? What are you going to invest in terms of invest in your business in France? So these kind of things are important to be outlined for a successful outcome.
Okay, okay. Well, it just actually makes me think, because like you've mentioned basically the case of people remote working who potentially could even
Yeah.
be with a non-working visa, so a visitor visa. But what about someone who would have, I know it's a tricky question a bit, so, but what about someone who would be like a business owner in the UK or the US, like a managing director, and wants to move to France and see himself or herself as remote working, but for himself? Is it still the same, or could they have like tax implications, or should they do something a bit different, like consider a business visa instead, or and
Well,
like be their own subcontractor?
yeah, I would suggest the two different options. Like either we keep the visitor, but we apply for a visitor visa, but making it very clear that the person cannot be working in France. So if everything is done remotely, it could be accepted. Otherwise, if the person wants to have an activity in France, maybe register a branch of his company, be able to go and meet some customers or do business in the country, physically in France. In this case, I would 100% recommend the entrepreneur visa, one of the entrepreneur visa. And you mentioned a very interesting thing, Fabien, about the taxes. We have to think about the difference between a visa and the tax, and because having a visitor visa, a lot of people think that they don't have to declare their taxes in France under a visitor visa. When they have an entrepreneur, it's obvious, like we do the tax returns. There is the company tax, the person tax that needs to be filled on a yearly basis. But something that is not as much known is the fact that with any type of visa, as long as you're a resident in France and you're living in the country for at least 6 months in a year, you have to declare your taxes in France. This does not mean that you have to pay anything to the tax authorities, especially if you're already paying in another country, because we have some bilateral treaties with the US, with the UK, and a lot of other countries. But you have to declare it. And this is very important. And a lot of people forget it.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a scare off, guys. Very often, you'd end up paying a very similar taxation rate in France. Because France has a bad reputation because of social charges, which you probably won't experience unless you employ people in France, or because even if you're self-employed, depends on the scheme, but maybe if you set yourself up as a micro-entreprise, which is the smallest type of business, that would be a fairly cheap kind of taxation. But I mean, we'll deep dive into this maybe a bit later in the question set. Okay, well that's very good. That's very good. Okay, so we'll leave Eleonore alone for a bit. I've seen quite a few questions, but I'll run through the other panelists and we'll get back to the question. Thank you, Eleonore, for this. Catherine, quite a few questions for you. And first, well, you've mentioned this indirectly, but well, so you've moved to France yourself and you've set up a business. So could say you're the embodiment of this. Could you share like what was your personal journey into like moving to France and starting your own business here?
Oh, well, my personal journey in terms of moving to France was I'm a long-term Francophile. My entire family is. I always thought that France was a great place to bring up children, have a family, that kind of stuff. Had no idea that working in France and administration in France would be quite as difficult as it actually is. That was a bit of a shocker, I have to say. And I do remember, we arrived back in 2002. Obviously, the internet did exist, but it was only for a select few, and not everybody had access to the internet. There was none of the kind of resources or advice that we take for granted these days. And one of my overriding memories is being in a phone box in Brittany with the rain lashing down, pushing coins into the slots, trying to contact, I don't know whether it was the URSAF or EDF or something or somebody, and my kind of 18-month-old was in
French
a
services for the audience.
Yeah,
French services.
yeah. My 18-month-old was in a pushchair outside in the pouring rain, screaming and sobbing. And that was the way that one did business back in those days. You had to phone people and try and get through to the right person and try and make it happen. And obviously, I didn't really speak French. And it was actually a flipping nightmare looking back on it. I don't know how I survived and kind of stayed sane, but I did. And then in 2008, I set up the first business that I had in France as a writer and translator, because my background is in journalism. And at that time, the auto-entrepreneur option wasn't available. So I had that whole thing of, declaring to various organizations, or caisses as they're known, and then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, them invoicing me for ridiculous amounts of money on their projected turnover. Obviously, I hadn't made anything like that money, having to argue the point, eventually pay it first, then reclaim it back. It was a flipping nightmare, to be honest. And it has got a lot better and a lot easier. But yeah, starting a business in France is nothing like starting a business in the UK, and I dare say the US. But it's completely doable if you take the right advice. And these days, with everything that's available online and from sites like Survive France and my podcast, quick plug here, France Made Simple, and people like yourself, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is like Eleonore, they have tax lawyers, and obviously they can deal with all of that. You definitely want to schedule a chat with her if you consider setting up a business in France. But I mean, what you're saying is basically, I remember going to the UK myself, having to set up a business, and when my business partner Jamie did it online, was in 2015, and it was basically 2 clicks of like 2 clicks and like a couple of forms. I was done. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, what did you expect?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that wouldn't be this straightforward in France. So even the locals, even me, like when setting up my own business, usually we well, probably not Eleonore because that's her jam, but usually we'd use the services of tax lawyers or accountants to get the job done for us. And it's not necessarily expensive. It's just that you usually don't want to do it yourself. Indeed. Yeah.
No, and it's not actually that difficult. It's just different. And like you say, It's 2 clicks thing. And I remember a few years ago, at that point in time, my ex-husband was running a UK business as well as being an auto-entrepreneur in France. And so he was doing 2 tax returns. And I'd done our French tax returns for years. And anybody that's done a French tax return will know the feeling. You have to kind of be in the right mental headspace, wake up in a good mood after a good night's sleep and decide, right, today I'm going to do my tax return. The sun is shining. I've got a big coffee. I can do this. So I was absolutely dreading doing his UK tax return because I hadn't done one for like 20 years. So I had the same mental approach, right? Okay, I can do this today. I logged on to the HMRC site and it was literally 2 clicks. I was like, oh my God, this is too easy. Where's the catch?
Looks suspicious.
Yeah, it's a different mindset. But there's good and bad in every country and everywhere, and you just have to accept that's the way it works in France, and you have to get your head around it, and it's fine.
And to be fair, yeah, it was one of the good things that came out of COVID. France digitalized a lot of its processes, and so it's much better now than it used to be. And actually,
exactly,
often is. I wouldn't say a couple clicks, but is getting closer and closer. It's just that it's confusing and the wording sometimes doesn't make sense. But again, usually that's why even the natives would use the services of people like Eleonore and her team.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are other people on the planet and in France, but I would only recommend Eleonore, though. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Even though I do, my accent's dreadful, but I do speak fluent French. I know how the system works.
I survived speaking with my grandma So that qualifies for.
I absolutely believe if you can farm stuff out in France in terms of admin to people that can do it better than you, basically, because that's their speciality, do it. It just makes your life easier. And we're all here to kind of, enjoy France, make the most of it, have a great time in France. So why bang your head against a brick wall when there are people that can do stuff for you better than you will ever be able to do it? So no, I'm totally signed up to if there are people at Eleanor, whoever it is, just take the expert help. I think it makes sense.
Because we kind of touching base on I'd say cultural differences when it comes to business. Did you have to do some I'd say some cultural adjustments in this regard, in the way you were approaching business or running the business? But,
Oh yes. I think the first thing I'd have to say there was, do not expect everything to happen immediately, because, even back in the day in the UK, you would email people and they would reply instantly. And I remember another lovely incident in an insurance office in Lamballe in Brittany. And I'd gone in there and I said, yeah, but I emailed you and you haven't replied. And the woman looked at me and she said, oh yeah, bien sûr. I don't have access to the emails. That's the boss's responsibility, and he checks them once a week.
Once a week?
Okay, all right. Things have moved on, but that's the basic premise and it's a good thing in a way. In France, people work to live rather than live to work, and so generally, people don't check their emails at 4:45 on a Friday night. They don't look at them at the weekend. And if they've been away on holiday, they will deal with their backlog in their own time, which is really bloody frustrating sometimes. But, it swings and roundabouts. A lot of us say we've moved here for a better and slower quality of life. We don't want that hurly-burly, consumerist, mega consumption kind of lifestyle. So you have to go with the fact that people leave their desks and
apart from wine for that.
Yeah, people, exactly. It's apéro time. So you leave your desk. You haven't dealt with something. Tant pis. It can wait. It's not life-threatening. You go home. You have your apéro. You see your neighbours. You do your stuff with your kids at the weekend. And you deal with your emails on Monday morning or maybe even Tuesday. And so it's that acceptance that things will not happen immediately. That was tough initially. And the other thing that I really learned is how important the personal touch is. People do business with people, and you cannot underestimate the kind of word of mouth, social connection element in France, and also the sort of low context approach. Often people or Anglophones say to me, it's so frustrating. Every time you talk to a French person, they say, c'est pas possible. Oui, ça va pas. No. Yeah, that's the default position. So then you explain why you need it to happen. And sometimes you do have to kind of give them a bit of a story, and you have to explain why you need them to come round to reconnect your electricity that day, because you've got a 3-month-old grandchild in the house, so he'll be cold otherwise because you can't give him a bath because you've got no hot water. And then it's possible. C'est possible. So it's just a different cultural approach. You cannot throw your weight around like we do in the UK and in the US and insist on customer service. You can ask nicely, and then you can also get a bit cross sometimes, but in a kind of, well, I'm cross because I need this to happen, but you have to have an explanation and a backstory, and then it's fine.
That's right. Yeah, well, so having been through that, do you have any, well, I wouldn't say pro tip, but like resources or support networks? I mean, what did you use to get through this?
Well, back in the day, there was basically sod all. It was me and kind of Googling things. But, these days, in terms of starting a business, I would definitely recommend getting in touch with your local CCI, your Chambre de Commerce, or Chambre de Métier if you're an artisan. And the site called the FNAE, the Fédération Nationale des Auto-Entrepreneurs, also has loads of really useful content. There's millions of Facebook groups. There's Survive France. You know, the resource.
Mostly Survive France.
Yeah, mostly Survive France. Survive France is actually brilliant. If you're listening and you haven't yet noted that, it's www.survivefrance.com. There are loads of resources online. I think it's a lot easier than it was because, as you say, since COVID, so much stuff has been digitalized and put online. I think you need to find out the information, and the gouv.fr site is the place to go to, really, apart from Survive France, obviously. Facebook groups a bit less so because they're full of people saying things like, oh, no, you don't want to do it like that. My mate Dave says, blah, blah, blah. Get your information from proper sources. Don't sweat the small stuff. Be realistic about the fact that it is going to take time to get anything done here, but that's kind of part of the attraction. That's why we're in France. So in terms of resources and support networks, I would say resources, official ones like the CCI, the Chambre de Métier, gouv.fr, and support networks, look at online groups and websites.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I've been on the board of USAF and CPAM, which is French Social Security, which is healthcare for the US audience watching, by the way. And I've been on the board for 8 years, and over during those 8 years, I've definitely seen quite a lot of improvements into trying to, instead of 3 forms, and we just have the one, and then it's online, and then so there's still like, when applying into French healthcare, it still has to be done. Like, it's funny because they call it digital process, like, because you download the form online. Still a PDF you have to fill in. Most forms have been completely digitalized. And actually, I think we had Sandra on one of the previous webinar, which is Eleonore's tax lawyer. She was telling us about the guichet unique, which is where you register for the micro-entreprise now. And honestly, it's much better now. I mean, it's not as clunky as the autoentrepreneur.fr website that used to be there. So no, it's much, much better.
I would agree. Most things have got much better. I mean, sometimes it still reduces me to the sort of state of being a gibbering idiot where I want to bash my head against a wall because something just does not work. But you do have to go with the flow and think, okay, it's not working today. I'll come back next week.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically the French government telling you to take it easy.
Yeah, exactly. C'est normal. C'est normal. C'est comme ça. Ça va aller. Right.
And actually, if you work with Eleonore and her team, she'll hate me for that. Then you just put the pressure on our team. It's like, well, it's not working. I need that done today. No, kidding. Okay, well, on to you, John. Thank you, Kat. We'll come back to you for the follow-up.
No worries.
On to you, John, because you have the privilege to teach us about the sexiest topic of it all, which is translation, accredited translation or sworn translation. It's particularly important for business types of visas. Maybe you can tell us more about like which documents you typically see as like being mandatory to be translated for some sort of, again, as Eleonore was saying, there's different types of business visa, but usually what do you see for those applications?
Sure. I think before getting into it, you mentioned certified, accredited translations, sworn translations. There's a lot of terms out there. And I've noticed even that the French websites, the government websites are using machine translation, and they're coming up with this term called approved translation. So what does that all mean? So anytime you hear this term approved, certified, expert, sworn, in French we say sometimes assermenté, we're talking about a certain type of translation that only certain people can do. And maybe we'll come back to that later. That wasn't really your question, so I'll answer your question.
No, but that's nice because you're correct. Um, it's a problem that I see often because even on official websites, technically, it's the French version that prevails, and sometimes, well, basically, even the translation on official websites is off. Well,
Yeah,
or
so
misleading. It's like, yeah.
sworn translation sounds really appropriate, and they're calling it approved on their website. So maybe I'll just quickly talk about this because if you're doing translations, make sure you're aware of the requirements. I was just doing a translation today. Somebody had it done by somebody who's not an approved, accredited, sworn translator in France, and the prefecture asked them to redo it by somebody like me. So you don't want to have to pay for things twice. What these sworn translators, we've gone to a court of appeal in France and we've taken an oath to serve the justice system. And we're also entrusted with providing certified translations so that the authorities can trust. We have put our name on it. We sign that this is true and accurate and certified. So that's one thing to
And
really
you're part of a list, like
we're
of
on a list and you can find the list, and there's some lists out there that are easier to find people than others. Just
they're
make
super
sure that
misleading. Yeah.
yeah, make sure when you're talking with somebody, you verify that it's a sworn translator based in France. They might say our official title is expert près la cour d'appel, so an expert, but most people also call us assermenté.
Mm.
And there's some lists out there. The ones that the government puts out are really difficult to navigate because you have to go into the
Yeah.
court of appeal and everything. There's some
Well, you have to
private.
know where they're located, basically. Yeah.
So getting back to your question, which is, what documents are going to be required? So we talked about like business plans, talked about certificates, any educational background that you've had that proves that you're competent or qualified to do something. When we were talking about business plans, and Eleonore was saying there's no set template, keep it short, keep it simple. People are going to have to read it. So also if you're going to have to translate that is going to reduce the cost as well. Let's see, I'm thinking about anything else. Any contracts that you're going to have or business proposals that maybe you have some already, recurring income that you can prove with that. So that's going to be something for that visa. There's some other documents that you'll need maybe at a later stage.
Yeah. It's good that you've explained the difference, between, well, sworn, certified, and like and regular translation. Because so actually, what is the name? And well, there's quite a few people that we work with on the insurance side who end up doing, their visas themselves. And it's quite often that we see the visa, it's not really being rejected, but it's like being postponed, or like they have to provide complementary information because they used a non-sworn translator also. I would use the traducteur assermenté in French, but so they didn't use one. And so they have to pay twice, like you were saying, and also may had some delays then into the application. So that was of paramount importance to make this difference. Also, there's a word that I've seen out there, yet another one. The word apostille. Maybe have you heard of that?
Yeah, so the apostille is something, it's a treaty that different countries have signed. Eleonore can maybe correct me if I'm not using the right term, but it's an agreement that everybody has, different countries have signed up to, and it's really to prove or to authenticate documents. So what happens is when you go get your proof of your diploma from the university, and if you were to send that to a foreign country, how does the foreign country know that you just didn't make a forgery? What you do first is you take that diploma and you send it to the Court of Appeal, and the law in France is changing now. Pretty soon, notaries are going to be able to do this, and they're going to be able to authenticate that this is actually coming from this university and that the person who signed it is actually a real person who is qualified to sign it. And they'll have another special document. So this is going to be important more for, if you're in France and you're sending documents outside of France, or if you're in in another country outside of France and you're coming in to France. My experience has been that for certain countries, they seem to tend to accept documents without the apostille quite regularly from the United States, from the UK. Whereas with some other some other countries, they're a little bit more strict to enforce this apostille requirement, and they'll ask you to to get a translation of the apostille and of the document itself.
Okay, okay, that's good to know. And so apostille or not, so is there, like, do they need to provide a specific, let's say, template or layout or format for the documents, like, for example, that I could send you for translation? Is there a required format, like legally speaking, or even like technically to get it translated?
No, you send the document and we'll take care of it. What I will say is that have a conversation with your sworn translator, because not necessarily everything needs to be translated. We've done a lot of bank statements when you have to show proof of income, and in American bank statements they have pages of advertisements, and I'm pretty sure that sooner or later I'm going to see a coupon for McDonald's that you can cut out. We don't need to translate that. So we can put on the translation, this is a section of an advertisement not requiring translation, and that'll just save that much time, that much money. So it's really important to kind of understand the requirements from the authority that you're dealing with. If they're requiring an apostille on your documents, depending on which country you're coming from, if it has to be done by a sworn translator, if they want, a lot of the authorities now are asking us to convert figures, currency figures, at the going ECB rate, European Central Bank rate.
Oh, really?
So this is another thing you have to be very careful about. If you're sending in, some figures and some financial statements, perhaps they might want to see that converted into euros, because they can't make sense of it on their own, apparently. And that could slow down your whole process of getting your visa. They might come back to you and say, no, we need to know how much this is in euros. So
Okay, wow. I wasn't aware of this one. That's good to know. It's like, yeah, they can work the math on their own. It's like $100,000. How much is that in euros? Zero? It's like they need an accredited translator to get the figures. Okay, it's good to know. Okay, great. I've seen quite a few questions. I think it's time to deep dive, and more specifically because I've just saw one from Stephanie for you, John. She was asking any recommendations on the best source for traducteurs assermentés in France. Do they have to be located in France?
I'll
they go to you, of course.
I'll put it in the chat. There's a couple of websites, and I'll add that into the chat. There's one called the CNECJ, which is like the national grouping of all the experts, and you can go in there and you can type in a language and find it. There's another private company that makes one as well, but you're not going to have everybody listed because some people have decided not to be listed in there. So I'll add that as an answer to the comment.
But honestly, like the website you've developed is really top notch. It's like trad24.fr, if I'm correct, and it's just top notch. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're doing certified and sworn translations, and this idea behind this website was to make it as easy as possible for you, for us, to get a sworn translation done in less than 24 hours and as cheaply as possible as well. So we have more than 135 typical documents that have been sort of standardized that we can get done and have done for you in less than 24 hours.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for this, John. So I think it's going to be a bit random. I'll jump onto the questions from the audience. Patrick was asking, I work as a commissioned sales representative for a French company in the USA. However, the work is selling French products in the USA only. In France, I will not market to French companies. Do I qualify for an entrepreneur visa? Well, I think it's more for Eleonore.
Yes. I've had a few clients that, for instance, are consultants and work 100% remotely, and they applied successfully for the entrepreneur visa. So it's perfectly possible, yes.
Okay. but maybe even possible. Well, potentially, then you need to have a chat with the guy, but could even be a non-working visa, depending on what
Yes,
exactly
yeah,
he's doing.
depending on the situation. But if you start with the entrepreneur, you might have more flexibility depending on what your plans are. So, yeah.
Patrick, you know what to do. You need to have a chat with Eleonore. Okay, Philippa is asking, I have a company in France. I'm planning to be in France 5 months a year and to work from the US for the rest of the year. I seem to have to apply for a residence permit and a talent visa. Will I need to apply for a new resident permit every year because I'll be out of France for more than 6 months a year? There's also other questions, but like, yeah.
Not necessarily, not necessarily. Like it could be renewable, but we have to see.
Yeah,
when the
well, I think basically there is a deeper issue. Philippa, I think the bottom line here is if you're not in France most of the time, basically you're not paying French taxes, at some point that's going to be a problem.
Mm.
Because I mean that's part of the deal, if you want to keep on renewing residence permit, then you need to be part of the French system, including be nice with the taxman. So okay. Um okay, let's say okay, Robert's asking in the UK, the services provided by accountants include company and personal tax returns. Do they offer the same in France? So, well, yes, but I think Eleanor, you have tax lawyers as well.
Yes, yes, yes. We do have a tax attorney and a tax department in our law firm, and we can do tax simulation. So depending on your situation, we can tell you exactly where you stand. Also, it's important to have an understanding of the bilateral treaties, tax treaties that I was mentioning before. It's very specific. It's a bit complicated. So sometimes it's better to have a very sound advice, but of course, I think that accountants can
Well,
provide.
it does work. I mean, I use my accountant for my personal and business tax return, but I'm just French, and it's not an international tax return, and I don't have to file a tax return in the US, for example. So I'd say eventually, yes, that's doable, but well, not being again a law firm. But my personal advice is, as expats, I mean, at least for the first year or couple of years, you probably prefer and want to use the services of a tax lawyer because they'll be more aware of international regulations and tax treaties and they'll be more in touch with the specifics of your situation. Whereas the French accountant is usually knows mostly about France. Again, some would know about international laws, but on average, I'm just generalizing here. While with you, Stephanie was asking if an application for one type of visa is unsuccessful, can you apply for a different kind immediately, or is there a waiting period?
Yeah, there is no waiting period. We can apply immediately. What is tricky is if you appeal the refusal, then you're a little bit stuck with the appeal. So
And only a lawyer can appeal, I think.
yes and no. When in terms of visa, there are two different steps. You have one mandatory appeal that is in front of a special commission that is in Nantes and that deals only with visa refusal. And this appeal can be done by lawyers, but by anyone. And if the decision of this commission
Oh,
is
okay.
positive, then you have to go to court and then you need a lawyer. You cannot go by yourself.
Uh, okay. Well, Edris David was asking, do I need to reapply in the US in order to start a business visa, or can I apply whilst living in France? I think it,
Well,
it depends on the current situation, doesn't it?
it depends on the visa he has. If you have a visa that is equivalent to a residency permit, I'm speaking about a 1 year renewable visa. In this case, you can change your status directly from France. If you have a short stay visa, or yeah, a non-renewable visa. In this case, it's not possible. You have to apply back in your country of origin or nationality.
Okay. Uh, okay. I've seen quite a few questions about artists. I know it's, well,
Yeah.
I've seen you answer a few. Also, we're running another webinar in January about the passport talent,
Mhm.
and that might be more relevant for this. It's not that we don't want to answer this one, but um, yeah, because yeah, there's a question. I mean, a part of the question that's you, Jason. I refer to. Sorry, but so also you mentioned running a JIT. So for JIT business, there's an interesting loophole. Well, it's not a loophole. It's like if it's a small operation, which is under the threshold of what we call LMNP, loueur meublé non professionnel. It's just the NP bit. Actually, that's important, non-professional. And so, which is basically 23,000 euros. As long as you do less than that, that could even be considered a non-professional activity, so a non-business. So you don't have to have a business visa. You could, but it's not mandatory. Um, if you exceed the threshold, it has to be seen as an activity. So, and then Eleonore, maybe they can go for like the micro type of activity or like a full
Yes,
registered.
both. It depends of the investment. If you invest more than 30K, you can apply for the talent passport. I've already done this for a few clients for running a JIT. So,
Okay, good to know.
mhm.
Okay, nice. Okay, this one's interesting from Chris. I'm a chef and I've come to France on a visitor visa. I am now looking at good, that's good. I'm now looking at making a change of visa status so that my family and I can open a restaurant. Which visa would be best for my situation, entrepreneur or talent?
Both of them. It depends on the investments. And also, if you have a family, it could be interesting to have the talent because their own visa will be facilitated.
Well, it's not only to be selling Eleanor's services, but like visitor visas, honestly, I'm shooting Eleanor in the foot for this one, but like visitor visas, often it's easier to get those done on your own. It's quite
Mm.
straightforward. But like business visa, it gets a bit more tricky. So like doing that on your own gets it's good to at least have spoken with professionals and have professional advice because like the rejection rates gets much higher. But passport talent, honestly, for me, I mean, unless you really can't afford the services of an advisor, but you have to go through someone that can get the job done because they're much more complex in terms of paperwork and the process is not as straightforward because we're talking about multi-years visa. I mean, but it does make sense because I mean, the passport talent potentially is the gateway into a multi-years visa or residency permit very quickly. So, more freedom, more gateways initially. So yeah, well, Chris, you can get in touch after this. Again, I'll share all of your questions and everyone's contact details in the follow-up email, so you'll have all the panelists' details if you can reach out, if you want to reach out. Oh, Trevor is asking a question that's very specific though, but I'm a cognitive psychotherapist currently working with clients in the UK and US. Arrived for first year in France on a non-working visitor visa. Sounds like I can continue working as I currently am paying UK tax. Should I move across to a talent visa? Oh.
Well, if he meets the requirements, you can move to the talent visa. But the tax is a different thing than the visa. In any case, if you live more than 6 months in France, you need to declare your taxes. This is mandatory,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
matter what visa you have.
Well, or other one, you're doing something you're not supposed to.
Mm.
Also, well, it's not part of the question, but if you want to start working with French clients, well, you should get in touch with French authorities in this regard because also you need to be able to do that in France,
Exactly.
the legality of that. But remotely you can. I mean, if you're legally allowed to work and operate in the UK and US, that's doable, but you'll have to file your taxes in France. So, well, maybe you want to have a chat. That might not be with Eleanor, actually, maybe with Sandra, which is our tax advisor, and figure that out, you know. Oh, actually, Patrick's asking, I'm a neuropsychologist with a PhD. Congratulations. My practice involves clinical and medical support, hypnotherapy. You're hard on me, guys. You know, like my voice is off, and you're all with the very difficult words. Is it possible to practice this modality in France? Actually, well, as I've been on the board of the CPAM, which is French healthcare, which are the ones who regulate doctors in France, basically. You need to get in touch with something called l'ordre des médecins, and see if, and actually that would also involve John in this, because basically they'll ask you to translate your diplomas, proof of experience, everything you've done, and see if that can be translated, more like converted into a French equivalent license, basically getting you a French equivalent, a French PhD equivalent, to see if this is allowed and if they'll allow you in France. Sorry. Given the labor shortage we have on doctors, that's probably not going to be a straightforward process, but I'd say odds are high that this could be accepted. But you need to be in touch. The name is the l'ordre des médecins. Those are the guys you need to be in touch with first. I don't know, maybe Eleanor, do you offer services like this to help assist them? Or?
We can help a little bit, but this is very specific.
Okay. Well, get in touch with me, then, I'll get the file to my buddies in CPAM. And if you send me a bottle of wine, I'll send it registered later. No, just kidding, guys. Just kidding. Okay. So we have still a couple minutes. I'll try to fit in a couple more questions. Okay, Seth is asking, I'm a film and commercial director, and would that fall under an artist visa? I plan on starting on freelance director and filmmaker, but I may also work for production companies. How do I need to manage working for myself and contracts with others?
Yes, I often have the questions for people that hesitate between the artist visa or the entrepreneur visa, because they can be quite similar, although the conditions are very different. It could fall under an artist visa, but we need to check how much revenue you generate with your artistic activity and what kind of work you are conducting exactly. And in any case, when I have an application like this, we start gathering the documents, checking the business plans and all of this. And then at the end, we decide whether we apply for the artist or the entrepreneur. In any case, at the end of the day, you will end up with a visa that allows you to work from France, to register yourself in France. And that is a proper residency permit, renewable residency permit.
Okay. I'm an EU citizen, recently bought a house and will spend half the year or more. I pay taxes elsewhere at present. Where do I start the process to find out how to start a small business? So you don't need a visa as an EU citizen. If you spend more than half the year, you'll need to pay taxes in France or file taxes. How do you find out where to start a small business? I think Eleanor answered it. Like you usually the entry point is the CCI or the Chamber of Commerce, depending if you have a commercial activity or basically if you're a builder or an artisan. So hopefully that's a start at least. But again, you can get in touch after this session and we'll share this over email. Teresa is asking, can a person move to France on a long stay visa for retirees and then start a small business at some point? Will that require a change in visa status?
Yes, if you work in France, you cannot use a visitor visa or a visa for retirees. You have to apply for the right visa.
Yeah, so it's either you apply for the right visa beforehand,
Yeah.
or if you move to France and decide to set up a business, then you need to change the status. However, well, we need to sign up that because France is very flexible, okay? So everything is doable, but also the French authorities, they're not completely dumb, So like if you apply for a visitor visa, because that was easier, and you just moved to France, and a couple of weeks, a couple of months afterwards, you're like, okay, well, now I'll change to a business visa. Well, it was kind of obvious that you wanted to do that in the first place and maybe just try to get the visitor visa because it was easier. So, like you could find the prefecture saying, go back to the US or the UK to reapply for the right type of visa if they deem that it's kind of obvious that, well, you were trying to, like dodge a bullet here. So it needs to make sense. I think that's what we say. If
Yes.
it's logical, yes. But if you're trying to avoid something, well, then apply for the write-up of visas right away. And by the way, I think we didn't say this, but this is a question I've seen previous to the webinar. A girl was asking, forgot the name. How long is a business visa max? It's like 1 year, isn't it?
Yes, but if you apply for the talent passport, you can get a residency permit up to 4 years.
Yeah, but it's always like a 1 year visa, and
No,
potentially that can lead into a multi-use permit or.
not necessarily for the talent passport. Sometimes you have like a 3 months visa, and during these 3 months, you have to apply for the residency permit. Mhm.
Okay, yeah, passport talents being
Yeah, it's
for well, I usually but you're right, yeah. That's the problem with the business visa wording is like it can pass a lot of options. Um, if I have a long stay visitor visa, shall I set up business by changing visa type? Okay, that's kind of the same questions we've answered already. Okay. Susan's asking, is it possible to buy a property in France before applying for a visa teaching English and art? Or should I apply for a visa first?
I'd say it's up to you, but what I always say is that you can perfectly apply for a visa without having rented or bought a place. You can perfectly do the visa application with a Airbnb booking, someone hosting you. So it gives you some flexibility because sometimes people are really delaying their arrival in France and they are very stressed because they cannot stay here more than 90 days and then it becomes a little bit of a nightmare. So usually I would advise, like, if you know that you're going to be in France, you want to settle here, let's start with the visa application. And then you will see. So you can take your time to find the perfect place for you.
Yeah. Actually, the other way around. Like, it's perfectly okay, obviously, to buy a place in France without a visa or residency permit. So you don't need none of that. Um, uh, Okay, given the time, I'll try to fit in a couple more questions and then we'll call it a wrap. But okay, David's asking if we are registered as a business in France, are we able to include the cost of accountancy, legal advice, translation? Well, yes. Well, it depends. If you're registered as a micro-entreprise, then it's self-employed in France, let's call it. The cost will be offset instantly, automatically, sorry, which is like usually they deduct 30% of your turnover and you're only taxed to consider those expenses. But if you're like formally, properly registered, like the equivalent of an LLC or LTD in France, which we call SAS or SARL, depending, then you can offset those expenses. For example, I think, what's your business scheme, John? Are you an SARL or?
I have an SAS.
Okay.
And
So you can offset those.
yeah, so different structures. Maybe a little bit off topic, but it just, you asked Catherine a little bit earlier about what kind of networks there are out there to support, and there's a really strong business-friendly ecosystem in France right now. And locally, you can get with associations that can help you, that can provide interest-free loans, that can advise you and counsel you when you get to France. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I came from one this afternoon where they've done 150 interest-free loans to small businesses here. So there's lots of things out there to help you.
That's nice. Okay, cool. Catherine, I think you are registered as a micro-entreprise. And so what's your experience with that in terms of business expenditures?
Yeah, I would say that having been
Are your cameras off?
Oh, sorry, hang on.
We lost
Right.
you.
Camera's back on. Yeah, entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneur.
Oh, that's not just
I
me.
can't say it now, and I'm not even micro entrepreneurs is absolutely brilliant if you don't have a lot of outgoings, which I don't, but it's still a slightly annoying kind of setup compared to the UK. Because in the UK, I could buy myself an iPad stand, printer paper, highlighters, all that kind of stuff, and offset it. And I can't here. But, you know, like I said earlier, that's the way it rolls. So you just have to go with, this is the reality. We live in France, but micro entrepreneur, I don't know why I can't. Right, Emmy is absolutely a brilliant setup for people who are either starting a business and want to test the waters, or people that, like me, who don't have a lot of outgoings and expenditure. Obviously, if you're like, you know, doing building, which you probably shouldn't be under that anyway, but that's another whole podcast episode. You know, if you have expenses and outgoings, it's not great because you can't offset stuff, but it is great if you just want a simple setup. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't have any money coming in a certain month, you don't earn, you don't pay. And that's really, really vital, I think, for small businesses, because that's what I found really difficult back in the day when the URSSAF, CPAV estimated that my cotisation should be €3,500 per quarter. Oh, my God. And I was like, but I haven't earned any money, but you still got to pay. So, you know.
Well, actually, it's a very good question after. So from Gawain, sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. Do you have to prove that you're able to speak French to get a business visa? I don't think it's mandatory, but is it, Eleonore?
No, absolutely not. No.
Good. And actually, I think it's only for residency permits that it could be a requirement.
Yeah, it
On
could.
some specific types.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Okay, one final question. Okay, well, sorry for those. Picking up Simon, you're the lucky one. I'm currently living in the UK, but I own a house in France. My question is, can I register a business in France as a sole trader / artisan and work whilst I'm in France, working on my own house? Also, I intend to move permanently to France as soon as the house is livable. Okay, so I'll let Eleonore answer the technical bit. There's just one thing that's very important. As a sole trader, builders are heavily regulated in France. It's probably one of the toughest regulation in Europe, because you'll have to be registered at the Chambre de Métier. Usually that's going to be fine depending on, you know, your experience, but usually they'll let you go. But you'll quickly find out that whatever you do, then the problem is going to be insurance, because you need to, like, it's mandatory, otherwise it's illegal. You need to have a 10 years insurance, even if you're a painter, okay? And often when coming from abroad, depending on the kind of experience you have, that might be a problem. So,
can I just jump in there and say that this happens so much in the kind of immigrant / expat community that people just do not bother with that insurance. And a lot of the time people get away with it. And occasionally it comes back to bite people, and it is so important. If you are actually a serious kind of, you know, if you're seriously trying to create a life in France, set up a business, be, you know, a general builder, a general jobbing builder, be a painter or decorator, you need that decennal insurance, and it is bloody expensive compared to the UK. But it's absolutely essential. And I've seen so many people come unstuck with not having that and then getting into trouble legally. So just a word to the wise there, you know, if you're going to do that, you cannot kind of fly by the seat of your pants in France. It will come back and bite you.
It must, no, you don't want to do that. It really is a felony, especially if you do that for years, and especially if something happens. And the more structural the job, the more difficult it would be. So that's actually easier for a painter, obviously, to get insurance than it is for a carpenter, for example. But again, if you have accreditations from city and guilds and you have like 15 years of experience, but like brace yourself for the paperwork you'll have to provide. That's what I'm saying. But like on the technical aspect, Eleonora, and we'll hand up with you. So like the plan he was saying, is it doable?
Yes, well, as long as you meet the requirements and the things that you have outlined, the entrance, all this, you prepare your business plan, all the paperwork. Yes, I don't see any reason why you could not do it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, sorry guys for those of you questions we didn't answer. Again, we'll share your question lists to the panelists with the panelists, and we'll send you a follow-up email with all of the panelists' contact details so you can reach out directly. You'll have an opportunity to interact with each of us individually. So feel free to reach out. If you still have a bit of energy, maybe you can like send some emojis to the panelists to thank them for being with us tonight or this morning for those who are early birds. And thank you so much for being with us. And yeah, the followers that follows us through the webinars. Thank you again. Thank you the panelists.
Beaucoup, merci. À bientôt.
Merci beaucoup.
Oh,
À bientôt en France.
Thank you for the love, everybody. That's so amazing. See you next time.
À bientôt. Bonne soirée, bonne journée.
Bye.